and welcome to our 2021 Suicide Awareness Mental Wellness Summit. We're so excited to be with you today. Thank you for allowing us. Thank you to the people that are here, and thank you for bringing us into your homes. I think you're in for a real treat. This is our 5th annual Suicide Awareness. And we have been we do it in conjunction with World Suicide Day, which is tomorrow. But we knew all these kids will be busy on Friday night and there'll be football games. And so we decided we better do it on Thursday so we could have it. And we've never done we try to mix them up every year. And we have never conducted a suicide study with a panel of this size and never with youth. So you guys rock. Thank you so much for being here. And I am Cindy Mills. I'm currently the chairperson of our Board of Commissioners, but I do this more of a labor of love for the community and especially tonight for these kids. So I'm just so grateful that you're courageous and brave and you're here. And we've got several people that are helping us on our panel. First, Lisa Snyder, the Nursing Director of Behavioral and Mental Health for Children's Health Care of Atlanta. Thank you for being here, Lisa. Cindy Levi, Avita Community Partners Chief Executive Officer. Thank you for being a part of our panel. Karen White is the lead school social worker and mental health coordinator for Forsyth County Schools, and thank you for being here. And then we have Victoria Ray, and Victoria looks like she's just one of these kids, but she's actually the Georgia Program Director for the Full Circle Program and the Substance Use Services Sector Leader for the Forsyth County Drug Awareness Council. So all of you that are here from Full Circle, all you kids, we're not going to call out names because we got minors and just decided that and we're trying to rush on time too. So we just appreciate all of you being here. And then last but not least, we have our Forsyth County Board of Commissioners Youth Council representatives that are here. So we're really happy that y'all are here with us. And then later on, Kevin Tanner, who is my boss, the Forsyth County Manager and Chair of the Georgia Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission, is here. So we are here to help inform. We're here to listen to our youth. We're here because mental health is a big problem. It is a pandemic within a pandemic that we are seeing the numbers just skyrocket. I had a slide. I called our coroner and I asked him, would he send me the deaths that had occurred in our county for the last 2 years. And I think I have a slide with that on it. But it is where we had 8 Forsyth County residents who died by suicide in 2020. We've already had 13 so far this year, which is a 62.5% increase. And the ages, I thought in that 13, and we've got a ways to go in the school year, they go anywhere from 14 years old to 90. And I was talking to our mental health person, Terry Hawkins, that works in our sheriff's office. We're so blessed to have our own mental health unit within the sheriff's office. And they've answered 3 suicide calls today. So, I mean, we hope none of them were successful, but it's just a lot going on in the way of mental health. I know it's a hard subject to talk about. I know that it's hard for some of you to be here to talk about it, but it's so important. We need to talk about it. We need to address the concerns and try to give some hope, because there's hope. There's hope. So let's get started with our questions. Tonight, Karen, I'm going to start with you, and I want to ask you, what are the current statistics for youth mental health in the school setting?
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Mills, for having me be a part of the panel. I definitely appreciate it. So our current statistics for youth mental health in the school setting.
Make sure your microphone's up so they'll catch you.
According to our Georgia Youth Survey, which is the largest anonymous survey instrument that we have in the school setting, and it is used to identify safety and health issues that can negatively impact student achievement and school climate. The number one reasons that students gave for wanting to die by suicide were due to family issues and academic concerns. Last school year, we had approximately 3.1 middle middle school students that expressed that they have attempted suicide on at least one occasion. And in our high school, we had 2.1% of high school students reported that in any number of occasions that they wanted to die by suicide. In addition to that, more than 40% of our middle and high school students responded or just reported symptoms of depression, feeling sad, withdrawn, not eating. And during the pandemic, we did see a slight decrease in the number of students who had suicidal ideations, attempts, and self-injurious behaviors. And I feel the reason for that could be is that many of our students were virtual, and so it was really hard to kind of report some of the students and capture that students who weren't in our building but attended school virtually.
Thank you so much for that information. And just a reminder that when we hold your microphone close so they can pick it up, I want to make sure everybody can hear you at home. So Lisa, you've got some statistics as well for child and adolescent mental health and suicide.
I do. So currently, 1 in 5 kids have a diagnosable behavioral or mental health disorder. 1 in 5. So that's our own kids, classmates, neighbors, teammates, cousins. And when you look at adolescents, that actually increases to 1 in 2. So 50%, half of all adolescents have had a diagnosable behavioral or mental health disorder at some point in their lives. Currently, suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24. That's more deaths for that age group than cancer, heart disease, and congenital abnormalities combined. And, you know, I think mental health has been an issue for quite some time. But like Cindy said, we're kind of in a pandemic within a pandemic.
Thank you. This question was submitted by our youth council, but anybody can feel free to comment on it. But what are the challenges that you see youth currently face with mental health, and what are the root causes of these challenges from a kid's perspective, young adult's perspective, and why do you think these numbers are up that they've just discussed?
I think I can take this question, and it's a great question. So youth face a myriad of issues when it comes to mental health issues, whether that be stress, anxiety, or depression. And there's also a variety of causes that are leading to that, whether it's some of the academic concerns or whether they're going through a tough time. But I think one of the greatest root causes that push youth into having mental health issues is a lack of a support system. And when I talk about support systems, I mean having friends around you and family around you that truly care for you. Someone that you can rely on, a shoulder to cry on when you're having difficult times. And many youth don't have that support system, and that causes them to deal with depression and anxiety. And that kind of goes to your point as to why are we seeing this become such a big problem during the pandemic. It's because many youth have seen their support systems being cut off. As they shift to a virtual platform, they can't interact with their friends in the same way that they've done before. So really bringing support systems for youth, showing care for all youth, regardless of their backgrounds, is one of the best ways that we can tackle the mental health issues that are ever present in our society.
Thank you.
And if I can add on to that, I think one of the other challenges that kids are facing today when it comes to mental health is the stigma around talking to it. I know even if people have these support groups that we're talking about, it's a lot of times it's challenging for people to openly talk to their friends, their family about their issues. So I think just the stigma of mental health in general is a really big issue, and that's hard to overcome.
And just adding on to that as well, I think academics has come to play a really big role in declining mental health. When there becomes a discrepancy between personal life and with academics, I think it's difficult for us to strike a balance, especially these days. And naturally, we feel frustrated, and oftentimes this can lead to excessive amounts of worry and fear, which can in turn develop into more severe issues when we don't have the system that we need to help us overcome these difficulties. Whether it be, a simple assignment where we feel frustrated that we're unable to complete, or the worry behind getting good grades and being academically accomplished. So we just need a system that can help us get through these things.
I've been reading a lot trying to prepare for this, and there's a lot of studies on school climate, and that your school climate is conducive for connectedness. I mean, that you're connecting with something. And I found it just very interesting that when I went to the school to do mock interviews with the kids, in just a short window of time, you know, you're not there with them but maybe 15 minutes each child, but I've been there long enough to hear 2 or 3 different young men say, I don't really have any friends in school. I mean, you're talking 2,400 people, but I think people feel, and from talking to you kids, a lot of students feel invisible. They feel like no one's seeing them. And it's almost like as our schools have grown bigger, we have been so trying to keep up with the growth that we forgot along the way that there were kids that needed to be heard, our kids that needed encouragement, kids that, and that's why I get very upset when I hear people say, take mental health out of schools, because in my opinion, and tonight will prove it, we need more mental health in the schools, not less. We need to connect more with our kids because we're losing them. So on to the next question, Cindy. Do teens really think about suicide, and do those having thoughts of suicide really want to die?
Very good questions. And I'd like to take a moment and just applaud the students that are here with us this evening for taking a stand and speaking up, because that's showing a wonderful role model to your peers. So thank you for that. So do teens really think about suicide? Yes, they do, unfortunately. In fact, 92% of teens surveyed indicate that suicide is a big issue in their community. And 1 in 5 teens report seriously considering suicide. And as Lisa mentioned, suicide is the second leading cause of death among teens, and it's second only to accidents. So if you think about all the number of accidents that occur, and that suicide is only second to accidents. So that's a very sad situation, you know, as you think about that. And then the second part to the question, do those who have thoughts of suicide really want to die? The answer to that really is no. As a matter of fact, most teens call for help after a suicide attempt. Suicide really isn't about death or dying. It's about ending the pain. Sometimes it's a physical pain that they're trying to escape, but most often it's emotional pain. An individual feels trapped in a situation that they don't know how to resolve. Today, what we find is that our young people, our adolescents, are needing to face adult problems and situations unprepared. Frequently, it's the compounding of issues which result in stacking one problem on top of another on top of another. And so in today's society, youth are faced with many issues that they really don't know how to solve. They haven't developed the skills or the coping mechanisms yet to deal with them, or maybe it's taboo to talk about them. It may be a situation that's happening in a family and the family members say, don't talk about this outside of our house. This is just our family issue. Nobody else has to be involved in this. Also, not meeting expectations, failures, rejections, physical or sexual abuse, and losses are just some examples.
Thank you. That was all. I could tell the kids were really responding. They could relate and had a lot of agreement with what you were saying. So Victoria Ray is with us, and she has created this full circle. And I don't mean the semicircle. The name of her organization is Full Circle. And Victoria, you're a person that's in long-term recovery. It hasn't been that long ago when you were in school, and you can so relate to what a lot of these kids are feeling. Tell us about your experience in high school and the programs that you or support you didn't have then that hopefully we're having more now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to share a little bit about me. I am a person in long-term recovery, and I was definitely this kid that y'all are describing, right? That really struggled with connectedness in high school. Really struggled feeling just very different, and did not grow up in an environment that was conducive to talking about this openly. So a lot of the stuff that was going on with me was behind closed doors. And when I was in high school, it was kind of this is going to age me a little bit. It was kind of when Facebook started becoming popular. And I still feel 16. I'm definitely not 16. But I started being bullied online. And it was hard for the school to navigate kind of how to address that. And I was going through a lot of issues that the school really hadn't seen before. I went to a private Catholic school, and they were just ill-equipped. You know, maybe I was called rebellious or problematic, or you know, the list could go on and on. But really, what was going on is I was suffering a whole lot, and didn't really know what was going on with me, and didn't have a whole lot of people to talk about it with. Fast forward a few years, I discovered kind of just did the best that I could and discovered some coping mechanisms, whether that be drugs and alcohol, unhealthy relationships with food. I mean, really, I kind of dabbled in all of it, to be totally honest with you, but struggled a lot with anxiety and depression, panic attacks, things like that. And just kind of did the best that I could, right? And I think a lot of kids that are struggling, that's what they're doing. They're doing the best that they can, and they're finding some avenues that work really well at the time until they don't. And instead of being labeled problematic, I think there's a lot of suffering that's going on. There's a lot of sickness, a lot of hurt. And so when I was, you know, after I kind of started my journey of recovery, I started my journey of recovery when I was very young. Moving back here, realized there was a lot of holes, you know, that people where I grew up weren't talking about stuff like this, and someone did something like this for me. Someone put a microphone in my hand, and, you know, here we are a few years later, and we have a Full Circle program, which essentially is a program that is a community for young people that are struggling with addiction issues and mental health issues. So it's kind of been this heart mission to bring what I did not have in Forsyth County to this place. And we definitely, there's a lot more need out there than there is people that are at Full Circle, right? So I'm really glad that we're doing this, because these are the things that started the conversations that helped me to get well, you know, just even to talk about this, to breach the subject and break that stigma, like you were saying, is huge. So I'll stop talking now, but that's my answer.
I actually have an experience to do with this, I guess. I've struggled with anxiety and panic attacks for the last 2 years of my life. And I actually ended up having a really bad panic attack at school. And my peers and teachers just kind of yelled at me and told me that I was going to get kicked out if I kept having panic attacks. And it was very hard to, like, even want to go back to school. Like, I ended up not going back and pretty much getting kicked out. And it was very hard, especially with, like, my parents, like, not understanding. And, like, what they don't know, they don't know. So, like, if they didn't really know I was having a panic attack, like, they couldn't really help me. But it was definitely, like, one of my low points in life. But, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that your story is so important, because I think what they don't know, they don't know. But I think it's just like in our sheriff's office when we added a mental health team. You know what you're missing. And sometimes we can't offer compassion or the right hand up to people when we don't understand it. And our reaction is, just shut up. Just stop. Just quit being this way. And that's not helping it. I mean, I think that one thing kids want is somebody to show them love and compassion and to form relationships. And I think that we can do that better if we have more people trained. I know our sheriff's office works really hard to train more and more people in mental health so they will react properly. And I think that's why mental health first aid is really important, and I hope that we can get that throughout the schools. I think it would be wonderful if we could. So tell us, Karen, what is Forsyth County Schools doing with mental health? What's your mental health program? What programs and initiatives are in place to address youth mental health, and how has that philosophy changed?
Okay. So Forsyth County Schools mental health program was implemented in 2017 to address and remove barriers to mental health services for students. We connect students and families to mental health counseling resources by referrals to mental health partners who offer individual and group support for students. In addition, we offer professional development training for most of our staff. So I'll go through a few of the programs that we do have in the school setting to address mental health and suicide concerns, and I'll just talk a little bit about each of them. So we have Signs of Suicide, Sources of Strength, Youth Mental Health First Aid, Mindfulness, and Assist. So a little bit about Signs of Suicide. Signs of Suicide teaches students how to identify signs of depression and suicide in themselves and in their peers. It reduces stigma around mental health and suicide and encourages help-seeking behaviors through the acknowledge, care, tell technique. The next is Sources of Strength. It is a best practice youth suicide prevention model designed to harness the power of peer social network to change unhealthy norms and culture and ultimately prevent suicide, bullying, and substance use. Mindfulness, we have our mindfulness instructor at the district level. She is doing trainings for not only for students but also for our teachers. Incorporating for teachers, she teaches teachers how to incorporate mindfulness into their personal lives for self-care, and how to integrate mindful practices into a daily classroom schedule for focus and to nurture social emotional well-being for themselves and their students. By doing mindful movement, it helps students learn how to be in their bodies. And we use the breath and calm and focus the mind. As kids become familiar with different practices, we expand into practices for self-compassion, such as loving kindness practices, and eventually we go into how to notice feelings in our body first. We welcome all emotions without labeling them good or bad, or not pushing them away or acting on them. Our mindfulness instructors has worked with kids with suicidal tendencies or ideations, and we talk about how we don't make permanent decisions on a temporary emotion. This practice teaches us how to let emotions come and go just like our thoughts, just like our breath. We learn how to be with the emotions even when they're tough. We also have our Youth Mental Health First Aid, which is designed to teach adults who primarily work with adolescents when and how to help when they're having a mental health addictions challenge or just a crisis. We have one certified staff member in Forsyth County, and we're hoping to bring 2 more this month. We have our whole child model. We are attempting to get many of our schools certified as whole child. The purpose of our whole child model is to educate the whole child, which means to acknowledge and address any non-academic factors that may impact academic outcomes while expanding learning opportunities. The services under our whole child model not only are for students but for parents as well. It includes job training, food resources, technology, educational support, and mental health awareness. We have Assist, which is our suicide first aid intervention, and it teaches participants when to recognize when someone may have thoughts of suicide and how to work with them to create a plan for immediate safety. We have trained most of our school counselors and many of our teachers in Assist and how to look for that. In addition, we have our student advocacy specialists. They are school staff personnel that support students who have expressed suicidal or homicidal behaviors. They work alongside many of our counselors and social workers to provide ongoing postvention support for students. So that's what we have in our school setting.
So, Karen, I know that that's a lot of programs that has been created in a short amount of time, because I answered to some people I have seen comments online from adults, unbelievable adults, that have said, we don't need to be in the mental health business in our schools. We need to do reading, writing, and arithmetic. And basically, that's it. And I think it's so important for people. It wasn't like the school system decided one day we want to be in the mental health business. It was that the need was there, and it was trying to meet a need. But how do kids know these programs exist? And your schools do have autonomy, so all those programs you mentioned are not in every high school or middle school, correct?
Most are. So our Signs of Suicide is a program that we do with all of our middle and high school students. So it's a screener to be able to assess students who are having thoughts of suicide. Not all of our programs like Sources of Strength, but we are looking to just expand as much as we can into each of our schools. Each of our schools, and when we did an audit, it may not be all that have every program, but each of our school is doing something to address the mental health needs of our students.
I think it's real important that kids know the programs out there and that they're met with love and compassion with whoever is trying to lead the program. So Lisa, how have you seen COVID-19 impacting child and adolescent mental health, and has COVID made things worse, and what are the indicators?
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, because of the global pandemic and the steps that we've taken to mitigate that, those mitigation strategies have only worsened behavioral and mental health across the nation. At Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, we've definitely seen the impacts of that. So for example, when we look at the data, from 2017 through 2020, we saw a steady but gradual increase in kids presenting with primary behavioral mental health reasons. At the very start of COVID, in March or April of 2020, we saw a drastic decline, and that was related to the lockdowns and people being fearful of going to the hospital. But since that point, those volumes have essentially skyrocketed. We're seeing drastic increases that are much higher than what we have ever previously seen. Along those same lines, in addition to higher volumes, we're also seeing higher acuity. So the volumes of kids that we're placing on a 1013 have followed that same trend. And what that means is essentially a child is presenting to the hospital with psychiatric symptoms that are so severe they require acute inpatient psychiatric hospitalization. And like I said, that's following the same trend. From 2017 through 2020, we saw a steady but gradual increase, COVID a slight decrease in those first few months, and then the volumes have skyrocketed. The other trend that we're seeing is in relation to suicide attempts, we're seeing more medical admissions. So previously, pre-COVID, we would see teens who, might have a suicide attempt, and we stabilize them in the ED, develop a safety plan, send them home, maybe transfer them for psychiatric care. But what we're seeing now is higher volumes of kids that are attempting suicide in more lethal ways, so in more deadly and harmful ways, that they actually require medical admission, and a large portion of these kids are actually requiring ICU admissions as well.
And Children's Healthcare is a good example. I can remember I was elected in 2012, so I became in office in 2013, and I had a child that, it's a name that I can't even say, but it had some type of schizophrenia on it. And she was in 3rd grade, and she had attempted suicide by trying to run out in front of a car. And at that point, Children's Healthcare did not even have mental health as it just wasn't happening. Or we weren't addressing it, because I can remember having dinner with one of the top folks and saying, this child had to go to Peachford. It's where my dad went for alcohol recovery. There are adults there. It's not a children's place. And it was, the parents said that's all that there was. She didn't eat for almost 20 days. I mean, because of that. She's doing great, thriving now. And I remember my friend telling me, you need to reach out to a state legislator, which he's in the audience now, and you need to get him to try to ask for a question, to bring that question forward, because before we can get funding, before we can start with this, we need to have that. But I bring that up only to say that's how quick this mental health thing, not that it didn't exist, Victoria, but it magnified, it just multiplied. It's gotten so much worse, and it's become more and more. And you've got the gamut of doctors out there that some just want to throw pills at it, and we know what can happen with, and I'm not saying there's not need for medication for lots of people. That is a great thing if it's taken care of properly and it's the right medication for you. But there's also a lot of other things that we'll mention later on that you can do to help yourself to be more resilient, to have more coping skills. So I want to ask any of the youth in general, has stress, anxiety, or depression ever affected you during your time in school? And how have you balanced your academic obligations with your personal interest and relationships?
So I would like to take this question. I grew up with the mindset of if I don't get perfect grades, if I don't get all A's in school, then I'm not going to succeed in life. A lot of my friends were doing the same thing, and I grew up with my older sister getting perfect A's, so I was trying to really be like her. And so whenever I got a B on a test, or even worse to me was a C, I would freak out and I would completely just break down. So growing up like that, I really didn't have many friends to hang out with because all of my life was just school. And recently I have been trying to find a balance between school, friends, relationship, and full circle. But the biggest thing for me was that I had to accept that I'm not perfect. And if I try to do everything perfect, I'm just going to stress myself out way too much and cause myself all these problems that I can easily avoid by just doing the best I can and doing everything that I can. And if I can't do it, I can't do it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I think a lot of kids are under a lot of stress, and they have that push to get into that top tier college, and you got to work in this, you got to work in that, you got to do this, you got to do that, and it sort of starts pressing down on you. And instead of being built up, you feel just, and that happens to all of us in life. But I think the beauty of being older is you have the experience and you know how to handle it. And when you're younger, it can become overwhelming and just become too much. Does anybody else want to comment on that?
I can definitely attest to that. When I also grew up in a private school situation like Victoria did, and I can really relate to Kaylin's share as well. But school was the home for this depression and anxiety to really run rampant, basically because I didn't know where to put it. I felt like everything that was being preached online or in school was being this academic robot that would get into the best college or get into the college of their dreams or writing the next essay or acing the next test, which is all important. But never once did I hear that it's okay to be human, or it's okay to struggle, or asking for help is normal. That's okay. But in the world that I was raised in, it was run to the bathroom if you have to cry, or hide your panic attacks, or don't say anything about struggling, or you could affect the people around you. I was kicked out of school after having one of my bigger panic attacks, my first panic attack, actually. And honestly, when I left, I had a lot of anger towards the school system and the people that had taught me anything, because I was none of them cared about me. It was all about the grades. It was all about making the school look good. But now that I've been gifted with so much healing and growth. I've really come to the realization as well that not all of it was their fault, that a lot of it was just the lack of knowledge, that they didn't know what they were dealing with or what was going on. And I think one of the biggest things that pushed me in my healing was when the adults and the peers made an effort themselves to not only say that it's okay to struggle mental health, but then made the effort to learn what that meant and what was going on in the child's head and what was affecting them and how can we make this place safer for them or learning more productive and okay. And that didn't just boil down to the perfect test grade, but a beautiful life. And it's okay to struggle and cry. And we're going to bring you up if you get a good grade, and we're still going to support you. You're not going to be pushed aside or, trashed if you made a mistake or had a hard time with a test. But yeah, I think that the school system, especially with like the COVID going on, was just a lot of isolation and keep it to yourself. Don't say it out loud. It was just a very unhealthy stigma of you can't struggle with this right now, or it can affect people around you, rather than let's hear what's going on with you and see how we can help you through this so you can enjoy the things that you're learning.
And I think that's important, that why we're having this conversation is to eliminate some of the shame that gets assigned to it, some of the blame, that the lack of knowledge is such a powerful thing, but so is knowledge given is an equally powerful thing. And I think educating people about the struggles, educating them about what anxiety might look like. I mean, I think kids that want to be invisible would not choose to be having panic attacks. They don't want the attention to be called to themselves, but yet they're not in control. And I think part of the healing process is to realize you are in control, or it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. No one's perfect. People might pretend to be. Facebook might pretend that it is. That's not real. And no one's perfect. Everybody are made up of all kinds of problems, and they're all dealing with them every day. I think to add to that comment, could you tell that COVID made it worse? Did you feel more anxiety? Do you want?
I think for me personally, being isolated for so long and not having already having some mental problems, not having the motivation to get up and call a friend and say, I'm upset right now, or I'm sad, or just being forced to stay in my room for weeks on end, or just if I do go out, it's no contact with anybody, it's just going to the grocery store and coming home. And I feel like the feeling inside of loneliness that I already had was just so heightened by physically being alone, because I could not be around anybody, and it added more to the internal feeling I was having.
I think that's the case. Does anybody else have any?
I have something to add. My anxiety and depression definitely heightened during COVID. I really just fell into this pit of I can't tell anybody, especially my family, because I want to put on this face that I'm the happiest one in this family and I need to keep them together. But me being in my house 24/7, around them 24/7, eventually it was going to come out, and eventually they were going to see me for me, and that really scared me. So I really just stayed in my room. My relationships with my family got worse. I barely had any friends at that point, so I just talked to maybe one person. No one really knew I was struggling as much as I was. And being alone physically just made it all worse, because then I couldn't put on this face that I was fake happy at school and then come home and lay in my bed and just rest. I was just home 24/7. Yeah.
So do y'all think that, I know as a parent and now a grandparent, I mean, you really want to push your kids to be all they can be, and you don't want to allow them to be lazy, and you don't want them. You got the pressure on you for perfection or being the best parent, the best this, the best that, as well. And if we were to be able to talk to our parents, I mean, and I also was at an event where one of our local high school principals had written a letter, and he is a principal in one of the most wealthy parts of our county. And his letter was about how we needed the Whisper program that we're going to mention later, but how it was so important because kids were not connecting at home, that their parents were so struggling to pay for this big house that they were living in and to do. And I want to be careful. I'm not assigning blame to parents. I mean, but I think it's situations that if we don't talk about the situation, it might not can get better. And the principal wrote, I've got kids that come to me and say, I haven't seen my parent in 2 weeks. I don't have anybody to eat dinner with. I have no, and that this was happening more and more frequent. And so I think that probably magnifies the loneliness and the, how much we need. And I know from a parent's perspective or a grandparent, sometimes we think that our kids don't need us anymore once they get to high school. Would any of y'all like to touch on how you might need your parent more then than ever, or you need them in a different way?
I think I can definitely talk about that. I would say that our parents always have our best interests in mind, most of the time at least. And sometimes there's a communication gap between them and us. We have had very different lifestyles, obviously due to COVID and due to this new generation that we're a part of. And there's always been a gap in how we've lived our lives and how they live their lives. So it's a struggle for them to understand our perspective on things and the issues that we might be struggling with. And we, at the same time, don't understand the issues that they're struggling with. So I think it should be more of a two-way thing. If we're able to come to understand our parents' perspective or grandparents' perspective or other extended family that we have, and in turn help them understand our perspective, I think we can live in a more cohesive manner, and we can get the support we need, and we can provide them with the support they need. Because I think oftentimes we also forget that our parents also have a lot of these issues. Even though they suppress a lot of it, they have a lot of stress, they have a lot of anxiety. They are raising us in such nice households, but they have to think in the monetary perspective. They have to think in terms of other things. How do we keep our family together? How do we maintain a good emotional connection with them? But they don't have the words to say to us oftentimes. And I think sometimes we need to take up the opportunity and really talk to them. Like for me, for instance, I talk to my parents about their day sometimes. I'd never really talked to my dad that much, so I started to ask him about his childhood stories, and sometimes I would make connections in my daily life, and I think that's what brought me closer to them, and they could understand my perspective in that way.
Do you think that culturally, I mean, that's something we sometimes tiptoe around, and we act like there's not cultural boundaries or difference? I know there's generational cultural differences. I've talked to many kids that are of Indian descent, and that they don't see things exactly as their parents do as far as integrating and being a part. And do you think there's added anxiety because of the cultural issues?
I think that definitely there is some added anxiety due to our cultural backgrounds. I would say that this is a typical stereotype, but in a lot of Asian households especially, with the culture that they're raised in, with the school systems they have, there's an expectation to excel academically. The system that they have in place requires students to compete. There's a ranking-based system. So naturally, we are also expected to do really well in our academics. I had this conversation with my parents the other day, actually. They were talking about how they got into college and how I was applying to college, and a lot of my things were extracurriculars, not necessarily academics alone. And they were struggling to understand my perspective on how academics was not supposed to be the sole focus. My life has to branch out beyond it. But thankfully, my parents are very understanding people, so I don't struggle that much. But I know a lot of other kids, because of the cultural gap that they have now after coming to the United States especially. Their parents have a completely different lifestyle they lived, and we have a completely different life we're living. So there's a huge gap in that sense too.
Anyone else want to touch on that?
I think the ideas of like the college application process especially is kind of a big gap between parents and kids, because there's such a hard emphasis, especially on Asian American households, because they value education so much, that the college education time became, really stressful. It's really stressful for me. It's really stressful for my sister ahead of me. So I think it's really important to keep like an open line of communication with your parents, that you want to take it, at your own pace. And it's important to let your parents know that you're going to be going through your college application process through like your own pace. You can choose the schools that you want to choose, and it's important to have their opinions in mind. But at the end of the day, you're going to be deciding what college you're going to, and it's important not to feel the pressures and to be stressed out.
Better be saving that money too. That could be a problem if you don't have the hope or whatever. So if we're talking about Lisa explaining the different terminology that they use, we've said a lot of different terminology already up here, and sometimes I think that can be very daunting to someone that doesn't understand it. So could you describe some of the misnomers that go with suicide? Like, we're not supposed to say the word suicide's one of them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there can be a lot of confusion related to terminology like suicide, suicide attempt, suicidal ideation. What do those things mean? What is the difference? So first and foremost, suicide is when an individual takes their own life. And, I think we have to be really mindful around how we talk about suicide. To lessen the stigma, we don't want to say that someone committed or completed suicide, but rather than that they died by suicide. A suicide attempt is just that, an attempt that an individual might make with the goal in mind to try to end their life, but they don't die from that. And then suicidal ideation is essentially the thoughts of thinking about suicide, and that can range from simply thinking passively of, man, I wish I wasn't here anymore, all the way to someone who has an active plan. They know how they're going to do it, where they're going to do it, when they're going to do it. So it's really important to differentiate that as well. The other thing that I want to mention is, there's this myth that always comes back around that circulates a lot, that if we ask our kids about suicide or if we talk about suicide, there's a fear in parents that we're going to put that idea in their head. And no research has proven that is true. In fact, talking about suicide and mental health in general actually, continues to decrease that stigma and opening it up. Like, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to feel emotions and talk about your feelings. And more importantly, it can help a kid and it can save a life. It can increase access to the appropriate resources that they need, and I think it's, way better to have an awkward conversation, to ask those questions, than it is to lose a child.
I think all of that is wonderful things to know. And Cindy, I want to ask you, because I know that I have personally known of many families that have lost people to suicide. And I think that we have to be careful when we're giving warning signs that people don't think, well, I watched these warning signs and my child was never like this. My child was not this or my this. But there are some things that check off more boxes than normal. That does not mean that every suicide attempt falls in a particular box. I think uniqueness, I've known kids that completed suicide that were very involved with their family, ate dinner with their family every night, went to church, was very involved. So I know that there's the generalities that doesn't always apply to everybody.
Yes, that's very true. And when we talk about the risk signs regarding suicide. Really, I mean, we've heard from a lot of the youth tonight already about the pressures that they're facing. And that's really what we look at as far as risks are concerned, including things like problems at school, or not succeeding at school the way that they think they should, or that others may think that they should. Having a bout with the law, getting into trouble with law enforcement. You know, you think about things like shaming the family, or how do I make it through these types of situations, or self-esteem. I'm hearing a lot of youth talk about, you know, I'm afraid to say anything, and I just don't have the confidence that I need to be able to speak about things, or, you know, just situations that happen in life, like a breakup of a romance, or an unexpected pregnancy. I mean, how do you deal with those things, right? Or a stressful family life, having parents that are depressed or using substances, and, you know, the youth know that, you know, they've been taught that's not okay to do those types of things, but yet they're living in an environment where it's constantly happening. Or a major loss of a loved one, or a loss of a home, or a divorce in the family, struggles with body image or sexual orientation. Those are all things that youth can face. So just because a youth faces one of those experiences, it doesn't mean that they will ever even consider suicide. But what it does mean, if they do experience those things, is that they need guidance, support, and love to help them through, and an opportunity to develop the coping skills that are necessary. Because without that guidance, support, or love, and without the coping skills, you may start observing some warning signs. So, talking about death or dying, well, why would a teenager be talking about death or dying? So talking about death or dying may be a warning sign. Also, doing research on ways to die, ways to end your life. Hearing comments, things said like, I don't want to be around anymore, or you won't have to deal with me much longer. Looking at abrupt changes in personality, change in eating or sleeping patterns, inability to concentrate. Something you may not think of, and that is giving away of possessions. I know of a teenager who died by suicide as part of a suicide pact when he was going into 8th grade. And 3 boys got together and said, you know what? We were bullied last year, we weren't accepted, and we're not going to deal with it this year. So they made a pact that they were going to die by suicide and not get on the school bus and start the next year. 2 of those boys did get on the school bus. 1 of them did not. And his father found him in the backyard with a bullet hole in his head. It's just terrible. But you know what? There were some warning signs after talking to that father. He said, you know, my son had these collections of things, cards, certain kinds of cards that he was collecting. He had a knife collection, and he started giving away things that were important to him. So sometimes there's just these little subtle warning signs or hints, but then there's some that may be obvious. You know, the use of drugs and alcohol. Why do people use drugs and alcohol? Really? To try to escape, right? And so in doing so, for a very short time period, they may not feel the emotional pain. But guess what? They didn't deal with the underlying issues or the root of the problem that they were facing. And so when that high wears off or the drunk wears off, the problem is still there. So it's really important to be dealing with the underlying issues. So you may also hear things like, oh, she's just looking for attention. Please, Realize that it's a cry for help, and don't ignore it. It's better to be safe than sorry. And some coping strategies that we recommend include take one day at a time, but plan for the future realistically, having things to look forward to. I know I've had that conversation with my daughter who was struggling with anxiety. Let's deal with today's issues today, but let's plan some fun things that you can look forward to in the future. And set realistic goals and definitely celebrate when those goals are accomplished. Be open with your feelings. After all, everyone has them. Spend time with family and friends, get involved in activities, and consider the importance of spirituality in your life. Make certain to seek help if you feel overwhelmed or troubled. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. We all need it sometimes.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. It just made me think, as far as the warning signs go, at least for me, especially during high school when I was personally at my most suicidal state, the warning signs for me just kind of came off in very unapproachable ways. So I don't know, it's just it wasn't always me being the person that was crying in the corner, essentially. It was me being very standoffish and rude and distancing myself from pretty much all of my friends and my family. So I think just tying into the whole idea of someone being invisible, I started to bring that onto myself by distancing myself from everyone around me and kind of doing everything in my power in order to be a very unapproachable person and very quiet and just not a very good friend in general. So I think in order for someone to even think about approaching me in that moment, it would have been a very bold move of them in order to show me love. I wasn't someone that was easy to comfort. I was not someone that was easy to reach out to. So I think when people hear of those who have attempted to take their life at that age, or even have followed through with it and unfortunately died from it, it's just one of those things that I knew at the time I was not a friendly face to come to.
But did you like yourself then either?
No, not at all. So I think even somebody trying to show me love was very difficult for me to receive, but just, I don't know, being loving in those moments when someone's acting very strange or even rude or just generally unapproachable, I think it's a very bold and uncomfortable thing to do, to even try to communicate with someone like that. But even if I had not responded in a way that was very friendly or gracious, I think it definitely would have made a difference if somebody had taken that bold move to talk to me in those moments, even when I tried my hardest to run away from it.
That's great advice. And I think it's so important that we teach our kids to be kind. I just feel like we're in a world that we spend a lot of time telling kids they got to be tough and they got to be this and they got to be that and successful, and you can't let people walk all over you. But I feel like we as parents and grandparents, we should be saying more often, if you see a child or somebody that is retreating, go over and, extend a hand. Ask them how their day is. Give them a smile. Those things are something that doesn't cost anything, just to show you care. Learn people's names. Say their name. For somebody that's invisible, that thinks no one cares about them, and Lord, you know how bad I am at pronouncing names, but just being able to give a friendly face, and it makes people feel I'm cared about. I think that connection. I taught at church camp one time, and there was a lesson in chicken soup for the soul, and it was a kid that was going home to end his life, and he had cleaned out his locker and had everything, and this real popular football player bumped into him and he dropped everything, and the football player stopped and the popular kid and helped him get it all up and give it to him. And years later, he got a note from that boy. And he said, "You probably don't remember me, but when we were in high school, I was leaving high school with all my locker stuff, and I was ending my life that day. And as fate would have it, you extended kindness to me. And that kindness showed me that there was good left in the world and that somebody cared." And I think that that's so important, that we all have that ability, every one of us. And none of us know what each other are going through. None of us know what happened at your home last night or today or anything. And so it takes such little effort to show kindness. And we live in such a mean world. Facebook has just created such anger. And you've got anger from elections and anger from this and anger from that. And people are just like bubbling up to the top constantly, and they're just looking for somebody to attack. And wouldn't it be so much better if we didn't want to be those people, and we wanted to be the one that sowed seeds of kindness instead? If you see somebody that doesn't have paper, that doesn't have a pencil, that doesn't have, that you're the one that says, "Hey, I got an extra." Wow, that took nothing. But it could really be a difference maker. So if we're staying on suicide, Lisa, can it be prevented?
Absolutely. Suicide is 100% preventable. And I think it's important to recognize that those preventative factors have to occur at every level. So at the individual level, within relationships, at the community level, and within society as a whole. But what are some tangible things that we can do to help prevent suicide? And one of the most important pieces is, intervening at a very young, early age, teaching kids resiliency and coping skills to better deal with life's challenges, and is one of the most important pieces. The other thing is to, like we talked about, talk about mental health. Ask those open questions. It's okay. Maybe you have a child who's isolating and doesn't feel comfortable or confident or is too scared to tell you, and asking those questions can draw a lot of insightful information. And when you do talk to them, actively listen. I know it's so easy to listen and be scrolling on our phones, but actively listen and take in what they're hearing. I think that's something that is so important, but is so lost in today's world. And then also validating the feelings. If they express their feelings, validate them. Even if you don't understand them, even if you don't agree with them, just validate them. And you can do that by saying, "That sounds really hard," or "It sounds like you're really struggling. I'm here for you." Just basic things like that. I think it's important to recognize the warning signs, as Cindy mentioned. The other thing that you can do is reduce access to lethal means. So looking at your home environment, do you have any unsafe items that a child has access to? For example, guns and ammunition, making sure that those are locked away. And medications is another big one as well. And last but not least, if someone or a child does express concerns to you, take them seriously. Don't brush them off as they're attention seeking or they're just being a moody teenager. You have to take all of those concerns seriously, and seek out professional help. Again, that earlier intervention is key, and you'd rather get them the help and support they need than it be too late.
And I think I did not know until I did a domestic violence training after I've been in office, and it had one of the silent killers, especially in children. 1 in 6 would take their life that had to live in domestic violence. Watching a parent, having to keep secrets, keeping that stuff buried inside instead of being able to talk about it, were things that really had a great impact on a child. That if that's occurring in your home, I think it's really important that you talk to that child and you seek them getting help, even if you're not seeking to get your own self-help. I think that's very important. So Cindy, is there a phone number to call or text or an app that people can connect youth with to help when needed?
Yes, we're very fortunate. Georgia is one of the few states that has a statewide crisis and access line. It's called GCAL, G-C-A-L. the Georgia Crisis and Access Line. I would recommend loading the app onto your phone, whether you're a teen or whether you're an adult. It's called MyGCal, MyGCal. And if you load that app on your phone and you're struggling, all you have to do is open the app. You can actually chat, text, or call and speak with someone who is trained, a trained professional, anonymously. But they offer a lot of different options. So you can text to 741-741. You can text help, and then someone will respond to that. There's also an opportunity just to talk to someone on the phone. And if there is an imminent or immediate issue that needs to be addressed, and there's a mobile crisis team that can actually come out and assist in that situation. So again, that's MyGCal, MyGCal.
So I'm going to try to speed things up because I want to get through all the questions and the kids participating. But Lisa, you talked about resiliency, and I especially like the part of your question that's how can the community help in this and helping give kids support and be more resilient?
Yeah, so resiliency is a new term that a lot of people are using. It's a hot item. But resiliency is essentially the ability to cope with life's ups and downs. And resiliency is essentially like body armor, right? It can protect you from life's challenges, from adversity, toxic stress. It can turn toxic stress into tolerable stress. And the really cool thing about resiliency is it acts like a muscle. So the more you exercise it, the stronger it grows. And this is especially true in children because their brains aren't yet fully developed. So I think from the community aspect and from a school aspect, I think it's really important to incorporate that at a community level and in schools, again, at an early age to normalize these conversations, normalize coping skills, and teaching our kids, life is hard. Life's going to be hard for everyone in a variety of ways. And that's okay because we're equipping you with the skills that you need to get through that. So I think it's really important that the community recognizes the importance of resiliency. Research has shown that resilient kids are better able to deal with life's challenges and that they make healthier decisions throughout their lifetime.
Thank you. And I know that it seems like just with my own grandkids, I mean, my grandson was in kindergarten last year and started experiencing bullying from other kids because he wasn't tough enough or he was being made fun of, that he needed to wear more sports clothing. I mean, things that my own daughter was like, Mom, this is happening in kindergarten? I mean, it's just unbelievable that kids are already being, picked on because of their clothing. I mean, that's, if I was at school, I'd have y'all all in uniforms so nobody would be able to tell all that stuff. But anyway, so going on, these are really questions that Victoria helped with. What are some of the best ways that we can support people struggling with mental health? And if you were talking back to yourself, your teenage self, what would you say?
Well, luckily, with my position, I kind of get to talk back to my teenage self every single day, to y'all. So, but I was thinking about, I want y'all to really answer this more than me because I think it'd be really cool to hear from you guys as far as what you would say to your former selves, or to the you a year ago, or to the new kid walking through the doors of Full Circle. But what I'll touch on briefly is just what some of the best ways to support young people struggling with mental health. I mean, I know you're going to talk about this later, but connection. I mean, connection is critical to dealing with all of these issues, right? I think about the benefits of individual therapy, right? But if I'm going home to the same group of friends in the same home environment, dealing with the same problems, and I don't have a network of people that can help me navigate that, it's kind of like throwing the kid back in with the wolves. Right, so connection, having a support system that you're able to lean on, a group of people that are willing to walk through hard struggles with you and can have gone through those struggles before, so they can kind of help you figure out how to get through them. I'm pretty, it sounds pretty cheesy, but I go back to love, to really trusting, people that I know have my best interest in heart, who have, walked my same path, who are trained to help me. I'm very much a person to go to, somebody that I know has what I want. I think at the end of the day, it's got to come back to that. It's got to come back to people that are willing to walk through kids who appear to be really, really hard to love, especially when they're going through stuff like this. Yeah, like I said, I get to talk to my former self every day. So I don't know if any of y'all.
Victoria says a lot that when someone's struggling, all you can really do is share your experience, love, and hope. And I know that I'm not the only one going through like my thinking process every night, or like feeling the way that I do, or reacting to situations. I'm not completely alone in it. And when I see someone express that they are feeling a way that I have before, like letting them know that I was there and I'm okay now. Like when I saw that from walking into Full Circle, it was a huge thing for me, just realizing that there is like physical proof that it does get better, and it can if I have the right support system to let it get better. And a huge thing for me was just having fun, because a lot of the time when I was feeling the way that I did or trying to talk to someone, it was just like, oh, let's talk about it. But that's all I was thinking about constantly, is how bad I felt on the inside and how miserable I was. But like having fun in a healthy way that can just really like let me let loose and have fun with people that I know care about me and genuinely love for me was one of the things that got me so much more than I could have ever imagined. But it was really incredible.
I kind of want to take a different approach to it. Like, if I had to say anything to my former self, it would kind of be that, like, this is a part of your story. Like, you're going to get through it. You're going to be okay. Recently, I've been, like, really, like, looking back and being, like, thankful for, like, how I felt, especially with Full Circle. Like, I have this, like, newfound, like, thankfulness for, like, what I've gone through, so that I can now help other people who are going through it, which is really cool. Because, like, when you're going through it, you think that you're, like, completely alone, that, like, you, like, want to end your life. And it's, like, being on the other side of it, it's, like, this newfound, like, hope I have. And, like, I know, like, no matter what hits me with life, like, I'm going to be okay and I'm going to get through it. And, like, that's what I want to tell other people, and that's what I would tell myself as well, is, like, you're going to be okay and you're going to get through this. Yeah.
It's great advice. Just really, really good advice. And Victoria was talking about a CDC study that had just unbelievable amount of kids that they followed out past high school. And it sort of goes with resiliency, and it's all about connectedness. And they asked kids, how did you get past it, or what got you there? What made you feel so isolated and alone when you were looking back on yourself? And they said it went back to their high school experience. Person after person, that was the number one answer. That followed with them on into the rest of their life. I mean, thinking back on their high school and how disconnected and how their relationships weren't there. And I think that using mindfulness, we need to know that. We need to know that a high school experience can stick with a person for good or bad the rest of their life. And so we need to, look at that climate. We need to look at, being a friend, reaching out to people in need and all different things, but being aware of that. So when you're looking at isolation and loneliness and its effect on the mental health of students, what can be done to foster closer connection between students?
So I just wanted to chime in there. Isolation and loneliness is one of the greatest risk factors that causes mental health issues and suicide. And it's really true that there are students that are walking around schools, walking in hallways that are truly feeling invisible. I once heard, this statistic, this fact, that this generation is one of the most connected generations ever, digitally. We can call each other, we can send a text by the snap of a finger. But we're also one of the loneliest generations. And that's such an odd paradox, that we can communicate with each other so easily, but we're so lonely. And that really speaks to how connection works. Connection is not just communicating with someone, but it's feeling heard. It's feeling listened to. It's sharing emotions with a friend. And I truly believe that connection and conversation is the way that we solve isolation and loneliness. Commissioner Mills talked a little bit about the Whisper program. I'm actually one of the student leaders that's running Whisper at Lambert High School. That's the high school I go to. And Whisper it's a grassroots student-led movement that's trying to facilitate this positive school environment through conversation. We want to bring students together, regardless of if you're in band, if you're in debate, whatever you do, bring them together and just have this very positive school climate. So, we post positive messages. We try to bring students together through social gatherings. So Whisper is really about connecting students together. If you see someone that's in the cafeteria, that's eating lunch alone, sit down and talk to them, and having a conversation with them, it can make such a big difference in their life. So connection is one of the best ways that we can deal with isolation and prevent suicides from happening to youth.
You had something?
I think when we first met, when we all met together at the Full Circle office, we played a game. We played a game called Current Pass. And essentially what you do is you pass the current around in a circle, and you can switch directions, and you can also skip people. And I think one of the points that Commissioner Mills brought up that day was this is exactly how a lot of students feel at school. They feel so out of the loop. They can't, jump into the current. They feel excluded from conversations that happen around school. So as mentioned earlier, I think it's very important for us as fellow students to take up the responsibility of talking to people around us. If we see someone who's alone, we should go up to them and make conversation. And I think that's something we should learn to do.
I agree. I think that's great advice. So in going ahead and trying to end on time, I would like to just a couple of comments maybe on if you were, as students, what advice would you give to administrators, teachers, and leaders that are trying to help young people struggling with mental health? And is there anything that you might do at Full Circle or that you would recommend that the schools even try? Yeah, wait.
Yeah, I kind of want to hear from y'all.
No, you put that microphone up.
Okay. I think definitely for me just kind of having the administrators really see the signs of mental health problems. Yeah, that's how to say it.
All right. Well, I'll add to that. Yeah, I think one, education is huge, right? You don't, you can't address something you don't understand. But despite that, really, I go back to just trying to reach out and to connect and to just bridge that gap with young people that are actively trying to push you away. And I think that we need a braver generation of leaders in our schools. Be brave enough to talk to these kids that you don't want to. Be brave enough to talk to the parents about what's really going on. Because I guarantee you, my poor parents had no idea what was happening with me, And so I think we need a level of boldness. We need leaders that are willing to step up and to do something about this. And what you're seeing here is these are not these crazy wild kids that we found under bridges and brought to this meeting. These are your kids. they're just like everybody else. They're just struggling with stuff that's not as visible as a broken leg or, you know, in fact, it comes out in really unattractive and challenging ways. So what I would say is be a lot more brave than you've been. I think we're doing a lot, but the level of like genuine love and selflessness that needs to come through those kinds of conversation in these programs just needs to be elevated, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's what I was saying.
So if we were, I'm sorry, Mary Rose.
I just have something quick to add. So like I've had a couple panic attacks at school, and I really wasn't asking any of the teachers or administrators to fix me or to like fix my panic attack. I was really just wanting to be able to take the time to call somebody that actually did know how to like deal with what I was going through, like someone from Full Circle or one of my siblings that actually knew me, because a lot of the times my teachers or administrators didn't really know my life story in a sense. So I would be able to like sit in the back of a nurse's office while someone would come in and check on me every couple of minutes and like give me water, but they weren't there trying to understand something they didn't.
I can see that. So as we wind down in doing this, and I just think y'all all just did terrific. I think each of you being here meant so much, and the church has just been wonderful, and everybody here has been so supportive, because I think everybody realizes this is a huge problem, and we're not going to fix it in this one. Hopefully we're inspiring. Hopefully we're encouraging someone that needed to be encouraged. But if we had a takeaway, Lisa, what would be a good takeaway?
Yeah, I think, there's this assumption or this stigma that, physical health is more important than mental health. And I don't think that couldn't be farther from the truth. They are not two separate entities. We like to think of them in silos. But years and years of research has shown that that's not the case. They are very correlated and they impact one another. And in fact, you can't have or achieve true wellness without mental wellness. So I think that's a really key takeaway. And, going back to the connectedness, there have been some studies that have actually researched the connectedness, and it is one of the, if not the most important protective factor related to mental health and suicide. When you look at a kid who has a strong, healthy relationship at the school and at home, that can actually decrease emotional distress, disordered eating, substance use, suicide attempts, and, it's really basic. It's human nature, but I think, we live in such a digital world that we're losing a lot of that basic human connection of just caring and loving and actually listening to our teens and to our friends and to our family and what they're going through.
So our live stream ends at 8, and we've really got a special thing at the very end, but I wanted to have Kevin Tanner, who has chaired and was appointed by the governor to chair the Georgia Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission, to just speak to us briefly about what that commission is doing and where they're going from here.
Well, thank you, and it's been inspiring listening to all of these young folks tonight. And Cindy Levi is one of our commission members, and Donna Hyde, the CEO of Children's Healthcare, is also on our commission. We are, I think, doing some groundbreaking work in that area. Mental health is something that's been talked about for a long time, but it's always talked about maybe as a second-tier issue. And I know my time's short, but I want to tell you just a quick story of how important I think mental health is. I went to Jekyll Island recently to speak to a group about mental health, and when I was in the Uber car, the lady driver asked me why I was there, and I told her, and after I told her, she started crying, telling me a story about her daughter who was in school and suffered from a severe mental health issue. And she was telling me the struggles she was going through trying to get her help. And I thought, an Uber driver in Jekyll Island and just a general conversation breaks down on you. This is a real issue, and it's a real problem we've got to come face to face with. So the Mental Health Commission is made up of 24 of what I believe to be the best folks ever assembled. They're experts in child, adolescent mental health, health care, and we are looking to move a major piece of legislation this next year. We have the support of the governor, the speaker, and other leaders at the state level, and I just want to hit a couple of high points. I heard a lot of this tonight from the panel about parity. Parity's a big deal. Parity meaning that we need to treat mental health issues at the same level as we treat regular health care issues, and that's something that Georgia has not traditionally done a good job. Mental health is always a second-tier issue. We look at it a little different. We're not giving it the same level of care as we do a physical health. So we got to look at the total health in Georgia. So we're looking at moving a piece of legislation around parity that requires parity, and it also gives consumers, advocates, and others the ability to make complaints. If they're not getting that parity, they have a mechanism. We also are looking at eliminating service gaps. That's one of the biggest issues is finding providers. There's just a huge gap in the number of providers in our state, and also finding ways to attract licensed professionals. Finding those people when it goes above needing maybe a group like Full Circle or a counselor at the school, but when you need additional help beyond that, finding those folks is difficult in some parts of our state. We also need to be able to streamline our health care providers. We've heard horror stories from especially rural parts of our state about pediatricians specifically not being able to get the help they need. So, and the other thing, we have saw folks who suffer from mental health issues, and we put them in this box where we maybe consider that their behavior is all criminal, that they have issues, and that's got to change. And we also, when we closed the hospitals down, and Commissioner Mills was talking about this turning point, we closed the hospitals down through the settlement agreement because there were some bad things going on in the hospital setting. But we didn't have an alternative solution to that. And that's forced people into the jail setting. It's forced people into the emergency setting. It's forced people into children's health care. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I want to encourage all of you here, the panelists, the young people, reach out to your legislators, reach out to your elected officials at the state level, encourage them to take this issue up. Now is the time. We have a unique golden opportunity to make a real impact on the mental health of Georgia. This is a generational issue we can improve. So I would encourage you to join me in doing that, and join me in reaching out and encouraging your elected officials to join with us and make this happen. Commissioner, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I look forward to continuing to serve as chair of this commission and making some good things happen for our state.
Thank you so much, and we all need to support that legislation moving forward. So I want to make sure that it keeps recording even if the live feed goes away, because we have a special treat. Chris is going to sing for us, and if you will.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm not going to go super long into a story just because time is so limited, but I was able to join Full Circle, which basically saved my life after 5 suicide attempts in a very short amount of time, honestly. I've been struggling with depression and anxiety for about 5 years, and it was starting to get the better of me, but these people came and they really just wrapped their arms around me and made me feel at home. I do love singing and writing music, so I was able to write a song about the hope that this place has given me. Is no
and own my addiction for me. God, you heard me at my final plea, and you sent someone to rescue me. And suddenly I can't cope, 'cause you sent me this ray of hope. Never thought I'd ever feel love that was real. I broke through an iron door, and you taught me to love me more, and I began to heal. God, you heard me at my final plea, and you sent someone to rescue me. And suddenly I can't cope, 'cause you sent me this ray of hope. And I should be dead right now, 'cause I almost let me down. Never thought I'd ever fly, fall in love with being alive. You heard me at my final plea, and you sent someone to rescue me. Suddenly I can't cope, 'cause you sent me this ray of hope. This Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. And everyone that was on the live stream. Thank you so much to everyone that was here and for organizing this. It's really beautiful that people want to actually show that they want to fight for the youth of this nation.
And if you've got more to say, they've told me that we're still on live. If you were cut too short, that was beautiful. She didn't know she was singing till she got here. So, I mean, that's a very admirable that you stepped up and did that.
Thank you.
Did you anything else? I didn't want to cut you short.
I mean, I guess if I were to speak to my younger self or people that were going through what I've been through or what my friends have been through, I would probably say you don't have to fight alone. There is hope. There's healing. There's recovery. And God gave you a voice for a reason. Don't be afraid to use it. And as scary as it is, sometimes we have to take the first step. But there's a step that you can take that will get you to healing and recovery. I never thought that I would be where I am today. I mean, I tell many kids that come in new to Full Circle that I wish they had seen me when I first came in, because I was just a walking corpse that didn't know what life felt like or what love felt like. And being able to be reached out to and held on to by so many people that fought for me even when it seemed like there was no hope changed my life. And that I can't express how many people I've seen in this program for the short amount of time that I've been there for 7 months, watching them grow and fly, watching kids come in that seem like they have nothing else left. I had nothing else left. I have one more step to take, and I'm just going to take it because clearly it doesn't seem like I have anything else going for me. That step, pushed me to run. And I've ran into so many people's arms that have just saved my life. And a future that I didn't think I could have I mean, I'm finally living in the moment and enjoying where I'm at in my life. I mean, I never thought that I would ever say that I was excited to wake up. And now I wake up excited to see what God's going to surprise me with that day, or what people are going to be in my life. There's hope. I think that's the biggest message you could.
And I think that's the greatest message to end this with, that there is hope. And no matter how bad, there's hope. And I think that your song said it, I think, and she wrote the song, but I think that offering hope and knowing you live in a community that cares and you have resources there for you. So don't quit. There's hope. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to the church. Thank you to all the people that have worked. Thank you, Jason Henline, Forsyth Central, and all his crew that have come and helped record this tonight. And thank you most of all to our panelists that I know this was hard. I know you stepped outside your box, but I believe you've helped other people because you did. So feel good about it. Anyway, that'll be the end. Thank you. Good. That was great.